3 million years in the future, Dave Lister, the last human being alive, discovers he is pregnant after a liaison with his female self in a parallel universe. His pregnancy concludes with the successful delivery of twin boys, Jim and Bexley. However, because the boys were conceived in another universe with different physical laws, they suffer from highly accelerated growth rates and are both 18 years old within 3 days of being born. In order to save their lives, Lister returns them to the universe of their origin, where they are reunited with their father, a woman, and are able to lead comparatively normal lives. Well, as normal as you can be if you've been born in a parallel universe and your father's a woman and your mother's a man and you're 18 years old 3 days after your birth. Shortly afterward, Crichton, the service mechanoid who had left the ship after being rescued from his own crash vessel, the Nova 5, is found in pieces after his spacebike crashed into an asteroid. Lister rebuilds the Noid but is unable to recapture his former personality. Meanwhile, Holly, the increasingly erratic computer, performs a heads exchange operation on himself. He bases his new face on Hilly, a female computer with whom he'd once fallen madly in love with. And now, the saga continuums. What's up, Smegheads, and welcome to Season 3 of Thanks for the Memory, a Red Dwarf podcast where we rewatch every episode of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf and discuss them. I am your host, Lee, and I am here, as always, with Blake.
Oh, my goodness. Woo! Well done, Lee. That was, when I saw this was in the content, I thought, oh, man, is he going to try to speed this up, or is he going to do it all in one shot? It's pretty amazing.
And to give myself a shot in the arm, I think I only stumbled over it 3 times.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. So we are here to cover Series 3, Episode 1, which this is a definitive break in the style of the show.
Very much.
It's still, yeah, we have new cast members. Well, we actually have 2 new cast members. Actually, neither one of them are new characters, but they're played by different people than we had seen them in the past. And just there are some visual cues that are a little different. This episode is called Backwards, which originally aired on November 14th, 1989. And the last episode of Season 2, Episode 6, was October 4th, 1988. I've already said season again.
Yeah, which I was quite interested. I put that in there because I was quite interested to see when the last episode of season, I see I added it there. The last episode of Series 2 came out, and then when, obviously, the first episode of Series 3 came out, and it was about a year.
Yeah, like it wasn't around the corner. It was about a year, and it looks like they got more money.
Yes.
Things look a lot better.
Well, some of it definitely.
Well, some of it does. I mean, by today's standards, they were knocking on some late 80s Doctor Who quality for special effects, which was a leap forward from where they had been.
Very true.
We also should address the giant mining vessel in the room. The show doesn't start with a Holly intro the first time. Well, not the first time. We did have the one episode where there wasn't the intro. It was the tongue-tied. But there's no Holly intro. And it instead has a Star Wars style scroll that tells you everything that's happened to the twins, why Lister giving birth, why Crichton is here now, which you so gloriously just gave us a wonderful rendition of. And before we get into the synopsis of the show, I was just going to say, that's a wild swing. They have not really done parody. You can say oh, it's kind of like it's a parody of Star Trek or whatever, but with slobs. And it's well, that's not really true. Yeah. It's kind of been its own thing. So it was interesting. They've referenced things like the movie Alien and stuff, but it's the first time they really do, parody the idea of the Star Wars scroll. Now, why did they do this so fast? Because if you came from season 2 to 3, you're just at a loss. When I finally, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I saw a little of these out of order, especially the first 3 seasons, saw the end of series 2 and went, what happened to the kids? And I thought I had missed this episode, and then discovered, no, it was this episode. But of course, at the time that was airing live on TV, I couldn't pause it to see what the heck all that said. And why did they choose to info dump the entirety of everything that happened into this scroll that then they speed up so fast you can't actually watch?
It's very strange, especially now. It's easy because you cannot slow it down, or you can literally just go on the internet and find it on the internet. It's there. So to put it into perspective, listener of ours, Corey Hall, he's been blasting through these. He hasn't been watching along. He got onto this series halfway through, when we were halfway through series 1, and he messaged me, and I think I've missed something. And I'm like, why? And I couldn't remember, because it's that long since we've watched them. And it's like, suddenly, like, everything's changed. But then I watched this. So I normally do my first 2 viewings on my own, and then I will do my third note-taking viewing with Tracy, my wife. And we were sat watching it last night, and even she was like, have you watched some of these episodes without me? And I went, no. She's like, well, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, well, that was all that info dump. Then it is strange because it covers a lot.
Yeah. And I have looked up and saw that there is a missing episode here, a lost episode where they were going to do the birth and everything.
Okay.
And there are even some, if you go look online, you can see some storyboarding and stuff. The story is similar to this, a little different, but Lister, like, trying to find things to do while he's super pregnant and about to burst.
Right, that could have been funny.
And he's just piddling around the ship. One of the things he does is he starts putting Crichton back together. And there are these gags where the head is sitting on the desk and talking, and he's like, so they were actually going to show a lot of what they talked about. I feel like there was a change. I think in that version, I don't know if it's just twins or one boy, but it's a similar setup, the whole parallel universe, that kind of thing. So they were going to do it, and then they didn't do it, and I don't know why.
Yeah, it could have been a really good episode. It could have been very, like you just talking about little bits of Lister being pregnant could have been hilarious.
Oh. Yeah, a whole episode of just him doing all the tropes you'll see in a show where the characters, they're having a baby or whatever, and there's like, before the baby comes, there's like several episodes of the season where it's just, like the mom, oh my God, my back, and all this kind of stuff, right? And you just feel like, well, that would have been stupendous to see Lister do all of that. But so they didn't do it, and I can't for the life of me, I wasn't able to track down, I'll probably be able to find this now once we've recorded.
Probably.
What the call was, why they didn't do it, was it that we had 6 episodes and they wanted to go and get to the meat of it? So they get to the meat of it. And I will say, as much as I'd like to see some of those things, there is something for, as opposed to us starting to like, well, they got to learn each other the way they kind of did in the original series. You kind of starting in the middle of things. I don't know. I mean,
I get that.
Look, I still love the show, but it is weird though. If you're not going to do the episode, I definitely can't find this reason. Why were they jerks and just blasted through that scrawl so you don't get any of that?
Because there's no way back in 1989 that you were even if you had a VHS, even if you recorded it off the TV, you'd have had to spend far too much time sort of pausing and stretching the hell out of your tape. Like, that section of the tape would have been knackered by the time you'd read that whole scroll.
Exactly, like, where you do the pause and it's like, and it's like janky all around, and you're trying to like write it down. It's such a weird thing. And so to the synopsis of the actual show then, as Rimmer is taking Crichton for a driving lesson in Starbug, they find themselves being whisked away through a time hole or an orange swirly thingy and end up on Earth where time is running backwards. Backwards, also one of the novels for Red Dwarf.
Okay.
That is,
I do plan on reading them. So let's, from the start, this plays hard and fast sometimes with the rules, and then other times really doesn't. But also, like, we talked about the whole Rimmer hologram thing. These next 2 episodes really go into what we've talked about. It's like, he's a hologram, but we're going to forget it at certain points because it's not relevant. Yep. And then other times we're going to play into it really hard. So, like, would an ejector seat work on a hologram?
That's one of the early ones I wrote down. And my wife said the same thing. She was like, wait, so now he can just be wherever. I was like, yep, the next episode, wait till we get to that. It really doesn't matter that there's no holograph cage or whatever,
It is explained in the trivia. I think I put some trivia in about how, I think it might be in the next episode, to do with the light bee?
Yes. Because they haven't introduced the idea of the light bee yet, that that the hologram has this little thing that floats in the middle of it and projects the hologram. But you skipped ahead though. You got to we did get straight to the Crichton driving
I know
lesson.
where you're going.
However,
Yeah.
this might be one of my all-time favorite openings to Red Dwarf ever, where we have an establishing shot that the room the boy stays in have changed. They still have the bunk beds, but it is now a new set. And I don't know if we're supposed to allude to they've moved to somewhere else or within the ship or whatever, but it's just Lister and the cat hanging out, watching the Flintstones. And they have this amazing scene where they talk about Wilma Flintstone and how desirable she is. And I just love that we've said it in the last couple episodes, but literally the cat Lister relationship is so rock solid at this point on.
Through this whole episode.
Yes. Yeah. They're just buddies. But I have a piece of trivia for you, if you would like, since you also do a podcast that talks about things at Universal.
Okay.
At Universal Orlando Resort, I was once a wand keeper in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So prior to that, I was also in the Beetle the Bard puppet show.
Nice.
And once you're in, or typically this is how it used to work, when you're cast in a show at Universal as a performer, every year you would do auditions. They'd have open auditions for the folks that had contracts to renew your contract, as well as look at any other things you can do. I really wanted to be a wand keeper. Also wanted to be a Scottish wand keeper because I thought I had a pretty good, like fairly realistic for an American Scottish accent.
It's not bad. I've heard it.
And I was trying to find, and the big thing is, these poor show directors, they see the same people every year that have jobs, and I was like, I want to entertain them too, because I'm sure they hear some of the same stuff over and over. There's just no way, right? So I went hunting for audition piece, and it, my friend, was this.
Oh, wow.
I rewrote the opening scene of this as if you were just sitting there watching the Flintstones talking to yourself about how hot Wilma is. And when I got to the end and I was like, this is crazy talk. She'll never leave Fred and we know it. Like, they lost their minds because I delivered that monologue so unfunny, in the sense so serious.
Yeah.
Like, it was the most serious conversation the world had ever had. And of course, none of them knew where this was coming from. And so when I got to the punchline of, she'll never leave Fred, we know it, the cackle that came out of people, like, it's hard to make Lyle laugh for insiders there, and I got him. So as soon as this episode started, I went, oh, I love this opening. Much like many openings, though, I forgot it was attached to this episode because it really doesn't matter. It could have been, and I love the trope of every episode starts with a sort of something with the boys hanging out. And so there you go. That's how I became a wand keeper, was the opening of season 3, episode 1.
I was always a Betty guy over a Wilma guy, to be fair. I prefer the brunettes. I preferred the brunettes over the gingers. Not so much anymore. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that.
It's just, but that bit, though, is, even though you're talking about the Flintstones and it's an excuse to get a joke in, they nail something from time to time, or actually more than time to time, quite a bit, where you totally believe this is the conversation of dudes stranded for years at this point on a vessel with just the 3, now 4, with Crichton the robot there. And then the idea that even Kat would have no idea this is, so Lister has been showing Kat episodes of the Flintstones. And they're so starved of human, other people connection that, like, here they are having this conversation, and it's perfect.
I wonder how long it's supposed to have been at this point between Parallel Universe and the beginning of this episode. I mean, obviously at least 9 months, I'm assuming.
He says he's 25, and I couldn't remember if he had said an age in any of the previous episodes. But we discovered we were a couple of years in, is that right? In one of our previous episodes?
But you think if he was pregnant at the end of the last one and he's had them and ship them back off, it's got to be, what, a year?
At least a year, so we're out 3 years or something. That's what I would think. But this opening bit, it's that thing where you're like, what did they do with the scroll? And then this scene is so good and sets the mood for the relationships that you're like, yeah, what? Oh, fine. Moving on. I adore this. It's one of my favorite moments in Red Dwarf, period. I love
having joined a ton of Red Dwarf Facebook groups, this is the meme that I've probably seen the most. It's like, I'd go with Betty, but I'd be thinking of Wilma.
Yes. I'd be thinking of Wilma. Yeah. Oh, that also got a good laugh at the audition. Yeah, forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the meme I see so much. It's hilarious. I can't remember.
Thinking of Wilma.
I can't remember specifically where the word is, but the word fortnight cropped up. And I mentioned this to you before we started recording, right? One of the questions I got asked by so many Americans the first time we came over to the US is, what the hell is a fortnight?
It was 2 weeks ago, right?
2 weeks. 2 weeks is a fortnight. But I didn't realize that it wasn't an American term.
I mean, it is, if they remember their Abraham Lincoln 7 years ago. I mean, like, it's like that terminology. I mean, if you're like, what's a fortnight? Isn't that a weird video game you don't pay for, but you pay for all the skins?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that one didn't occur to me, but that's because I'm a nerd who reads history stuff.
Well,
so like that one.
Oh, no, also, if you've already said you grew up watching a lot of British comedy shows and stuff, so you're sort of well versed in British stuff, and you've probably come into contact working where you've worked with a lot of British people, so you're aware of it rather than the average American that isn't sort of paying attention to that sort of stuff.
So a fortnight is like a commonly still used term in the UK.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, like
it sounds way cooler than 2 weeks from now.
It's like, oh, how long are you going to Orlando? Oh, we're coming over for a fortnight.
See, I love that. That's why I stayed up late watching all these British shows when I was a kid. Like as what's Eddie Izzard say? Two nations separated
by a common language.
The Atlantic Ocean, which is true, and also a common language.
It took me a while to get used to Hetty Hayridge as Holly in this. I wasn't keen on the first couple of viewings. By the third viewing, I've really come round to her. When it's like, oh, please switch on the autopilot. And she's like, autopilot engaged. Well, I say autopilot, but it's really me, isn't it? It's Muggins you're actually doing it. And her delivery is so different from Norman Lovett's, but still so good. There's one in the next episode. I love her delivery. And it's not even a funny line. I just love it.
It's the way like in the parallel universe episode, you're like, oh, this person is a perfect cast for the female version of Holly, right?
Yeah.
And so when she pops up here, and it's weird that I wrote this in the next episode, she's in it a little bit more. So it's odd that she's in this one so little.
Yeah. Because
you do feel like you kind of need to establish, right? You kind of get a good establishment for Crichton. You get a bunch of time with Crichton, but not so much her. But she does like. She really gets there, and she plays dumb so well.
Yeah, when it's like, when is it? When is it, Holly? And it's like, with the data I've got and the current information, I would say, and the joke's coming because that's the joke I would write. That's the joke I would say if someone asked me the same question. I think it's about lunchtime, maybe 1:30, and you're like, I knew it was coming, but it's still funny.
It doesn't matter. It hits every time. I love the and speaking of the cast, like seeing Crichton makes me so happy. And of course, because I haven't watched these in a while, I forget like, oh man, we're really seeing and we've said this obviously about other characters. It's the beginning of what Crichton will blossom into. But man, he's not. He starts at a 9 and gets to a 10 in subsequent episodes. Like he does start very strong,
yes.
The mannerisms, the sort of awkwardness, the super unsure of himself, oh my gosh. Like, he becomes, as I wrote it, he becomes absolute favorite of mine. And even if it isn't firing on all cylinders just yet, I love seeing him, but he's so close to it though.
Yeah.
So, oh God, I love looking at my notes here. Crichton and Rimmer driving test. You can throw a hologram out of a ship. I wrote that too.
Yeah. It would go straight through him, surely. He would stay where he was, and the seat would just go through him.
Speaking of, though, that driving test, like, classic, I mean, like, that kind of stuff for Crichton, though, like, I've learned all the controls on Starbug too. Well, they're the same as this one.
And that's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the problem. Yeah. I mean, it's so good. You're going to fail me now, aren't you? I can tell. It's like, and that Rimmer to the hilt. Like, I want freedom on the ship, and Dave won't do what I say all the time, but you are an android, and you will.
Yes.
So I need you to get certified, even though, no, you don't. No, you don't. There are no rules. Yeah. Everyone's dead. Just ask him to do it. Learn how to do it. But instead, he goes through the proper protocol.
Yeah, totally Rimmer. Yeah,
I love
completely. I'd never considered that, but yes, you're right. He could just do what he wants with Crichton at that point, but he still has to make him go through the protocol.
Yeah, he makes him go through all the protocol. And my favorite thing will be that at some point, it's clear as we get through further episodes, might even be next season, Crichton's like, oh, I guess I should learn all the rules too. And it really starts to bite Rimmer in the butt because Crichton's like, oh, you like the rules, and starts to follow the rules like as it goes. Almost bringing a bit of the Queegness back.
Yes.
Not in character, but like in terms of like using the rules against him kind of thing. Speaking of Starbug, money in the budget now. I know that they reuse the footage a lot as the show goes on.
Yes.
But the Starbug launch and everything, the miniature work, that looks great.
It does. But I did notice the lift off of it was used in this and the next episode.
Oh, yeah. They do the Battlestar Galactica thing from the 80s where like, or 70s, whichever, where it's like, you send the ships to battle and you're like, I have seen that every episode. Like, yeah. But it looks great. I mean, like, obviously it looks like they had a day to kind of get some filming for that kind of stuff. And I think they honestly use that quite a bit through the subsequent seasons. It looks great. I love miniature work. I'm a sucker for that stuff.
It did make me laugh how it has screeching tires noise as it takes a hard left. Like,
yes.
I don't think that will be there, but okay, I get it.
Well, it's like that thing where it's like all of a sudden they do the slapstick comedy, and there it is again. Yeah. I did like, by the way, speaking of Rimmer getting tossed out of the ship with the ejection button, that on my HD version, you're like, oh yeah, there's the wires. They're about to throw him out of the ship. I forgot about this gag. Oh yeah, clear as day. And I used to work on some effects for stuff, so I knew he gets thrown out, and then I look and I'm like,
all right, so you were looking for it, yeah.
There it goes. You see him get tossed out. Makes me happy. There are things in movies that you love. I will not tell you where to look, because once I do, you'll never not see.
I ruined Terminator 2 for myself once by looking for a specific thing, and I found it, and I was like, and now I can't unsee it.
Oh, there's one in the Great Western Tombstone that just ruins a super dramatic scene because you can see the cabling and wires going up the actor's pants leg that are going to be used to blow up the shot to his chest. Yeah. And now I can't not see it. And I love that movie. Makes me crazy that I know that.
I love that Rimmer made Crichton do his theory test, by the way, for all the road signs, or the space signs, as it was, with the outline of the naked lady that space mirage is ahead. And what's
space mirage is ahead?
The stopping distance. You're flying at 3 times the speed of light. What's the stopping distance? Like 14 months, 3 hours and 16 minutes. What's the thinking time? A fortnight. That's where it comes from. He asks him what the thinking time is. A fortnight. There you go.
That is exactly where it hits. And it's like all the stuff we're talking about is like a massive swing to go back to the very beginning. Fast scroll. Who's Crichton? Here he is. This is what's happening. Like, just bam. Like, that you just hit the ground running, because I only know it this way, but maybe that's good,
Because to be fair, as far as Crichton and Hilly go, it's not like you're meeting them for the first time. You have an idea of who they both are. So it probably didn't make sense to kind of introduce them from a start-off point of view, quite honestly, because we know who they are.
Yeah, and what are you doing? Just wasting time?
Yeah.
Showing people, hey, this is them now. Just go.
And we know Red Dwarf doesn't waste time on superfluous crap, because what's the point?
No, exactly. In fact, I think that's pretty correct. There might be a time when they do, and it's when Red Dwarf has like a weak episode, as if they do try to explain a little too much, you know?
Yeah.
I love the time hole effect. We got more effects. I love it. Like, even though they're cheesy little, I think it's putting glitter and swirling it and putting a light through it and filming it from below. But like, I love it. They're there, and it's just more than they were playing with before. But I'll say this. You know, they film on location on Earth. Well, of course it's Earth, but you know what I mean? They film outdoors, the special effect. They've got more money to do stuff, but it doesn't feel like they overdid it. It doesn't feel like they went nuts with it.
I think they only had a certain amount, so they used it where it had the most impact.
Yes. And I do love that once they go through the time hole, that then they fall in Earth, and it's like the outside windows aren't even like a pond. It's like in somebody's fishing tank is what's green screened into the window. Like,
but they start off straight away that those fish are swimming. I need to say flying. They're not flying. The fish are swimming backwards. So if you're watching it for the first time and not fully paying attention, you wouldn't necessarily notice that. But this is where my 2024 brain had a real issue with this episode, because there's times when they really lean into the backwards stuff, and then other times where they kind of don't, and it just annoys me just a little bit, because I just want it to be, it could have been a perfect episode, but there's just these little niggles I have that just pull it back from being perfect.
I wrote that down, that I love the backwards gags. They're so good. I don't even care that you know it's coming with like people eating and stuff. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's still gross. But there are moments, especially more so my second viewing, that I was like, wait, why are they riding the bicycle backwards? Everything else they do is forwards.
Yeah.
So they should be going forwards and freaking out everybody else.
It's weird.
Now, if someone else was driving, like the guy driving the van going backwards, that makes sense. He's a backwards person. So, yeah, when they choose to do things, like literally, they watch Crichton and Rimmer put on a show eating forwards, and then they eat backwards.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't, but I don't care. It's still fun.
No, absolutely, but it's weird when they choose to do the backwards stuff and when they don't. And then there's obviously like certain scenes where they've just literally reversed the film, and then other bits where they've done like a weird... They've put, so the person's kind of trying to talk like they're talking backwards, but they're not.
Yes.
And they do it that way. But then there's also where they're sounding like they're talking backwards, but they put like a weird echo effect over the top of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yup. It's kind of odd.
I love classic Rimmer, and I love this episode gives us two things. One, Rimmer wants to be in control, but can't with Dave. And I forgot how one of the great things about getting Crichton into the cast is it gives a character that Rimmer can be that anal controlling person that he wants to be. So you see that again as he's sort of given up doing it for Lister almost. And I forgot how much I adore that smug version of Rimmer. But there are, these moments where you're like, God, that's just... It's so good. It's so Rimmer. And the one that makes me laugh every time I see it is when the lady in the restaurant's like, Hishmergip. And then Rimmer just goes, I wrote here, flabba-dabba bleep blop.
Yeah.
No, flabba-dabba bleep blop bleep. And it's the way he delivers it friggin' kills me as they are in this backwards land. And I adore the fact they land and it's Nodnall and Crichton. Wait, this is London backwards. And they figure all this stuff out like, which is great because literally it will be done in a backwards way later. Crichton showing up in the restaurant with a black medieval cloak on and a Ronald Reagan mask is one of the...
you said don't look at it. See, that was when, because I immediately thought of you after the conversation we had a couple of episodes ago when he's like, he looked like something to do with his head looking like a novelty condom.
Yep. I was like, oh, there it is again. Yeah. That term to describe Crichton gets used several times.
Oh yes. I mean, to go into it's kind of talk just to jump in with a bit of the trivia. So we've talked about the backwards stuff, and some of the trivia is like the scenes on the backwards Earth rely on optical illusions for many of the reverse sequences involving signs and printed words, as we've said. But instead of actually printing them backwards, things like the newspaper headline Crichton reads, and nod null is like the letters are in the right way. They're just written backwards, whereas it should have been backwards, and it's not.
Because the exit sign is just backwards.
Yeah. However,
but you're talking about like the serifs and stuff.
Yes.
The L is still shaped the right way. It should be,
But it says, however, if you look at the masthead, the title graphic on the newspaper, it's actually printed backwards, both words and lettering. At the beginning of the brawl, a man is wearing a white T-shirt with the flash printing forwards. And this is what I mean. It's like there's just... I think I've said it before with the parallel universe where like it's supposed to be on the female version and she's called Arlene, but yet all the stickers, they haven't changed the stickers around Rimmer's bed and they still say Arnold. It's just those little things that stop it being perfect.
Well, that was one of those rules things I wrote down, was a newspaper. So everyone here speaks backwards because time's going backwards, except the newspaper explains things in a reverse way. Instead of written backwards, someone robbed the bank, it says someone held up a bank and gave them all their money back. It's like, well, actually, wouldn't it still just be the bank robbery, but written backwards? But like, look, I get it. This is way funnier.
Because it would... the reverse is happening though, isn't it? Because a bank robbery would be a group of people entering the bank and giving the bank money back.
But if everyone's moving backwards and speaking backwards, like how... If you think about like the order of payment and stuff like that when they buy food or whatever, and I'm like, well, if that's the case, then why... How is it hurt my brain. It was like, this is worse than a time travel episode, like trying to dice what the rules are. But I don't care. What's that? Is it Alexander Dumas, never let truth get in the way of a good story? Or something like that. There you go. I don't care. It's still funny. So
there's a bit later on when he's trying to order 2 pints and he can't get the woman behind the bar to understand. So he says to the guy across the way, "What's that you're drinking there?" And he says, "Erskib." And I'm like, if this was right, he would have answered you before you asked the question.
Right. That's what I mean. So, and I know they're going in a forward way, and it's like, how do you parse this out? It makes me want to get the book again and read the book, because they actually spend a tremendous amount of time in the backwards world.
It would have been interesting to see how they would have written this episode now. Because I think they would have lent into it more and it would have been fleshed out a lot more. It would have been interesting to see.
Well, and now too, so it's so much easier now with digital to like film this stuff, play it in reverse, and then just have the other person comped in a way that you wouldn't have to do the thing where people are faking moving backwards at times, you know, which
because that's where obvious. Yeah, when they're talking backwards, it's the bit when the comedy club owner comes in. And obviously, he's talking to Crichton backwards. They're both backwards, but then Rimmer's talking to him forwards. And that's at that point, with not having the special effect for it, they had to do a wonky way around it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked.
Right. Yeah. You have to do it that way. I love this, that they're like, we have to get a job. And, you know, there's a guy looking for a talent variety act and everything that we do is unusual. And it's like, oh, that's brilliant. Which leads to the scene I love where then you've got Lister and Kat looking for Rimmer and them. And when they find Nod Null, it's like, wait, it's Bulgarian, isn't it? It's Bulgarian. Like, I love that. Like, and he lists everything as if he really does know it. Like, I don't know, like, you know, they produce iron ore or whatever. Like,
that's when he's like, when he thinks he's figured out and he's like, Nod Null. It's in Bulgaria, isn't it? It's just like south of Croatia.
Hey, we're looking for our Friendski, our Budskis, Palskis.
So I said to Tracy watching this, is that would we get away with that nowadays?
I think the reason it works is the two of them are so dumb. If it's Rimmer, I don't think it works. But I think it works with these guys because we know that they're stupid, and there's sort of like a lead. And Kat, right, is literally ignorant.
Yeah,
he's just copying what his humans doing.
True.
And Dave has made no qualms about it. That, like, on one hand, while he does read stuff and he's smarter than he comes across,
which we'll see in the next episode, by the way.
Yeah, but he's had no love of like I don't know what's whatever, like trying to retain knowledge for the sake of knowledge, or like is not a thing. No. So I think because it makes them look stupid, I think you get away with it, right? Because it's like not making fun of Bulgaria. It's making fun of the fact that like that's what this idiot thinks.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
Fair
like,
enough. Yeah.
I think it's funny you say that though, because I had that thought like while watching it, like, is this still okay?
I mean, it doesn't bother
maybe
me,
it is,
but yeah.
Yeah, but like you said though, not okay. But like, would someone produce this now?
Yes.
Like because they don't want to deal with anything. But I think because it makes them look so stupid. I mean, if anybody, Liverpool should be upset about what it says about their public education. I suppose is who could get upset about it. But I have a Britishism question for you.
Okay.
And it is the act that Crichton and Rimmer do, as they are the Forwards brothers, or the backwards. They're called
brothers,
the backwards
the reverse
brothers, right?
brothers, aren't they?
The reverse. There you go. So they do this show where it's like, they're just doing normal things, but in a forward fashion. So that's weird to everybody.
Yeah.
Rimmer does a very specific affectation of his voice.
Yes. I think you. Yeah.
And I want to know where, because it's like, and I'm like, what? Because I hear that and I hear, is it Terry Gilliam and Monty Python? I hear that accent in some Monty Python sketches and stuff when they're God, I wish I could think of a good example, but that, and it's so specific to me, and I've heard it in other comedy things out of the UK. I'm like, what is that? What is that making fun of? I don't
know. I think it's kind of like a circus announcer, kind of posh-ish, sort of British weird affectation. It is very odd. I noticed it too.
It totally threw me. I mean, and it threw me off because when I heard it, I was like, I know that. I really think it was a Terry Gilliam sketch in my. I've heard.
That sounds familiar, actually.
Or maybe Michael Palin, but I've heard that accent used in a similar way for this sort of like this
Let
host
me just jump in
or
for
whatever.
all British listeners. That is Michael Palin, by the way.
Michael Palin. Thank you very much. You are correct.
Before everyone goes, bloody Americans, Palin, what the hell?
It's been a while since I've watched any Monty Python stuff, or to have their names at the tip of my tongue. I mean, I will say the record collection, there's a particular record collection of theirs that I had as a kid that I wore that tape out. I listened to it over and over and over and over.
Me too. It was the one with Eric the Half a B on it. I love that.
Yeah, that's the one. Yes, it's got Eric the Half a B. Yes,
I think it was
over and over and over and over.
I had was called Monty Python and the Final Rip-Off, I do believe. It was like a 3-cassette thing. It was absolutely brilliant.
I had the cassettes of the record one, whatever that was called, and then I had that one, but I think I might have had that on CD. All I know is I could listen to the Cannibal Boat Trip over and over, where they're, how long is it? Have we started
over?
Personal
question.
Shut up!
Yeah,
you're ruining the atmosphere. Yeah.
Going just back into sort of the weird backwards stuff. A bit of trivia again. When weird how it. So when Lister and Cat cloak and they come down off the ship and they forward off, and then Lister goes to find Starbug and he walks out of the water forwards, but obviously it's backwards. So in the trivia, apparently he nearly drowned filming that scene because obviously he had to walk slowly backwards into the water, but because they needed him to go under and not float, they weighted his clothes down. So he had weights in his pockets to stop him floating off, and one of his foot got caught in the mud while he was underwater, and no one realised until the cameras started rolling and he failed to come out. And then someone had to jump in and rescue him.
Holy cow. Well, you know what? I didn't even think about that. How did they film this? Because his clothes. I saw it and went, he went. This is backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, he walked to it backwards. They did, and then they reversed it.
That's
uncomfortable. I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
that's awkward. Can you imagine walking backwards into a lake?
And it's a lake or a pond. Like, of course your feet are going to get stuck in the mud or whatever. Like,
just imagine that whole filming scene where they're like, right, action, Craig, action.
Oh my god. Oh my god! I didn't even think. I love to. There's a little nod to Star Trek 4.
Is that the Voyage Home?
That's the one that went back to Earth with the whales, and it's set in the 80s.
So. I don't think. I'll be honest. I'm not even sure I've seen that film.
You should. It's the one after the Search for Spock because it's actually really funny.
Okay.
That one is almost a comedy because they're in Earth in the 80s and it's funny. But anyway, they have the ship that they're flying, they cloak it. And it's a very similar effect to what Lister does with the cat. And I love how it's like, that's weird. All of a sudden, Red Dwarf ships have like a cool tech. And you're like, no, that's just so they don't have to build a Starbug
that's true.
and set it on the...
Yeah,
I
never considered that. Out. Brilliant.
Yeah, it just cuts, you don't have to worry about it.
And the effect we get is cat banging on the side of it. It's just a gung, gung, gung to show it's there, but it's not there.
I love... Do you see that? Do you know what that is? It is. I do. It's an orange swirly thing in space.
I have to point out as well, the compere from the comedy club is Tony Hawk, or the guy who is the voice of the food dispenser with the lisp in the first episode, and also I think he's in one of the other ones as well.
I was wondering if he was prominent because I just was like, that voice, like
that's him. And then the guy who owns the comedy club was at the time a quite famous stand-up comic over here as well, Arthur Smith, and which is my favorite, not joke, but the funniest thing when he berates them, sacks them for the bar fight that went on, and he goes out and he slams the door. And then there's a slight pause, and then the backwards triple knock on the door, like a... It's hilarious. It's hilarious, because there's enough of a pause to think that he's gone, and then just this weird backwards knock, knock, knock. It's brilliant. I love it.
Did you, and I saw the trivia, did you say, like, so he actually said something they played in reverse?
Oh, yeah. What was it? Do you want to read it?
Yeah, you are a stupid, square-headed, bald git, aren't you, eh? I'm pointing at you, but I'm actually not addressing you. I'm addressing the one prat in the entire country who's bothered to get a hold of this recording, turn it around, and actually work out the rubbish that I'm saying. What a poor, sad life he's got.
I put that in the trivia, but didn't actually read it. That's hilarious.
That is flippin' brilliant. I love that so much.
Just
oh my god!
I wasn't the first. Like, this is my first viewing of this since, like I said, probably 10 years ago. And I was like, the first time I watched it, I was like, it's quite a famous episode of Red Dwarf. And I was like, it was okay. And then the more I watch it, say I separated these viewings off. When we did the last 2 episodes, I watched them all 3 times in the space of about 3 or 4 days. This one, I literally watched my first viewings of these were after we recorded the last 2 episodes, and then I waited a week, and then so there's been a week in between, and then like 3 or 4 days in between to kind of separate it off, and it worked much better for me doing it that way. I really enjoyed these 2 episodes. I
did something similar. I was in such a good mood after we recorded our Queeg episode and the Parallel Universe that I think that night I watched the first one of these, and I kind of watched them quickly and then gave it a bit. Went on a holiday and then just came back and then watched these last night to sort of do my notes. I agree. It's a very famous episode. What did I wrote? It's very let's see. Oh, it's full of great one-off gags. Like, it's just got the Wilma conversation at the beginning. We'll get to it. The button at the end of the show. just like, there's so many good little one-off things that are really good in this. It's not, we'll get to our thing at the end. It isn't one of the best episodes, but it's got so many good moments of it. I wrote down, how well, again, Rimmer can travel off ship. Doesn't matter now at all. Also, one of my favorite lines from Lister to Rimmer in Red Dwarf ever is Lister saying back, as he said, as Rimmer's explaining how this world is better. Because there's a funeral, and then you're dead, and then you come back to life, and then you go backwards until you go back into your mother, and then she goes into her mother, and back again until we're all one glorious whole. And he says, "Rimmer, you are one glorious whole."
Yeah, I knew that's where you were going with that one.
Oh my god, it's just, and it's 3 years now, 3 series with these guys, and you're like, they just have it nailed for how these two talk to each other. But it's interesting. I do think I think adding Crichton and the naivete of Crichton is so good to this, because even when they get back together, as a cat, like, as long as Rimmer's getting made fun of, he won't care, right? No. But Crichton listens to everything, takes it in literal, like, and it's such it weirdly provides such an important thing so that I feel like these scenes can happen, because if all you have is Rimmer and Lister at each other all the time, that doesn't really work either, you know? So you kind of have this balance of the group now, and usually you like it in threes, but there is something about adding the fourth with Crichton, and particularly like sort of his almost childlike wonder of things works so well to set all these other jokes up. Like, there are times when Lister or Rimmer in the previous series needed to kind of, and it worked in the story, that they kind of would shed off a little of what you know about them to kind of help a situation out, like a human would do. So I'm not saying it's not real, but it's almost like adding, you know, Crichton into this mix. They don't have to do that anymore. Also, they've been living with each other for longer, so there is no more like worrying about upsetting each other at all.
No.
At this point.
It's weird as well, because it kind of allows them to do something they've kind of done before, but it allows them to do it more naturally in this, and that is have not necessarily multiple storylines through an episode, but to tell parallel stories. So because you've got, in this one, you've got Cat and Lister together, and then Rimmer and Crichton together, you can show the same kind of thing, but from two different perspectives. So you can tell like parallel stories all going on at the same one, and it does work like that. Whereas before they did it, but it was like Cat and Rimmer, and then, or Cat and Lister, and then Rimmer and Lister. Now we can separate it off completely, like we're kind of going to see in the next episode. Well, in both of these, actually. Probably more so in this one. Well,
and just like seeing Rimmer, I said earlier with Crichton, and the way he's Mr. like, he gets to overlord over somebody because the android has to listen. Like, you get to see other facets of the relationship. I love how Cat doesn't give a damn, but it also makes it so that Rimmer can't really affect the cat. You know, the cat's above him, and it makes him crazy because he can't affect the cat.
Yeah,
the cat doesn't care enough about him. But like with Crichton, he can. I think I've mentioned this in the pod previously, but I come from a world of, I used to do a lot of fight choreography and stuff for theater and some films and TV. And man, I love this backwards fight, because anytime someone starts learning how to do fight choreography and stunt work or whatever, you dream of like, I want to do a Smokey and the Bandit barroom brawl. Then we don't do those in movies anymore, but you want to do one so bad. So seeing a barroom brawl in reverse just delights me to no end.
It's funny Absolutely as well that they set it up so early on, because as soon as Lister and Cat get off the ship, Lister's like, oh, my ribs are killing me. Have I got a black eye? And you're like, what? You don't think much of it, and then you get to that point where the barroom, and then he's like, where are you going to, you? I can't remember what Rimmer calls him. He's like, I've just realised why my back hurts, and he runs round the corner and they chuck him through the window, or they pull him back through the window, I guess.
And it's a good chuck too. Because it's in reverse, it's hard to tell. I was trying to tell if it was a stunt guy through the window, we call it a Texas switch. He follows the camera through the window out of frame, and then Craig Charles would stand up in frame. But because it's in reverse, I'm like, did they actually throw Craig Charles to that window? Did they? And because on one hand, I'm like, you'd never do that. But then again, they almost drowned him in a lake. So maybe they would do that. It was
funny. We're watching, you say that, we're watching Only Murders in the Building at the moment. And we were watching one of the episodes last night with Paul Rudd in it. And I don't know, have you watched it, Blake, at all?
We haven't. That's one of those on the list that we haven't gotten to yet.
So I don't know. Anyway, right? There's a certain character who is a stuntman. I don't want to spoil it, because if I say something too much, it will entirely spoil things. Where it is Paul Rudd, and he's like running up a car bonnet and throws himself into a dumpster, but it's that obvious where he runs round in behind the camera, and then someone else obviously runs up and jumps in the dumpster. But yeah, it probably was, like you say, they nearly drowned him, so they quite possibly chuck him through a window.
Well, because I was like, if that's a Texas switch, the guy that went through the window is very close to where he was, and that's either dangerous in itself or it's just him.
Yeah.
And I couldn't quite tell. By the way, that's one of the more nerve-wracking stunts you will do, because a lot of times what you do is you will put these little pieces of pyro that go to each corner of a plate glass window, and they have a little nail in it. And when the pyro fires, think of it like a shotgun blast.
So it cracks the window.
It just cracks it. So you have to time it just right so that it cracks as the person just before hitting it. Otherwise, it looks fake.
Yeah.
And then especially when a movie's like, we're going to do this in slow motion. You're like, oh my God. Or worse yet, one I was on was like, hey, we're a really low budget film, but we want to do this effect. Cool. How many glass planes do we have?
One.
We only could afford one. Oh God.
So you've got to get this perfect.
I hope this works. Yeah. Like, I hope this works out all right. But that's kind of like, again, production value and budget. I'd love the fight. Here, have your tooth back, and the guy gets his tooth back.
But that's not even backwards. That's another one of those weird wonky ones where it's not because Lister's moving forward. He's like pretending to kind of do it backwards, and it looks a little bit wonky.
It does. The scene prior does give me one of my favorite Lister lines that I say out of context my whole life, and that doesn't make any sense, but when in Rome, do as the Snaymores.
Yes, it's brilliant.
When they spit the beer back out into the pint glass. Yeah.
See, that's it. I've just thought of another weird one there. So when they're sat at the table, when they first get to the cafe, and the woman comes to clean the table, she dumps the stuff that's in the bin on the table. What's the reverse of that? That can't possibly happen.
Oh yeah, I guess she dumps it out.
She dumps it out.
The verse would be she needs to leave with that bin, and then eventually when they leave, other people will come there, and their mess will go back together into the food. Right? That's what if you kept playing it out?
No, because it would be her. If the reverse of that in normal time would be her clearing the table and putting it in the bin, but she doesn't. She dumps. She's not scooping it up.
Oh,
so
that's
true. Kind of like flying back into the bin would be the opposite.
You'd want to film it in reverse, like they did with the coffee and the tea, where like the sugar scoops back up into the spoon.
Oh my God, that woman eating that chocolate eclair. She drinks the tea as well, as sloppily as she can, to make that reverse look even worse than it is.
And I love, like, she's got the cream on her face, so you know what's going to happen, and it doesn't matter. Like, and the Dave Lister one, I'm like, and the Lister and the cat one doing their whatever they're eating in reverse.
I think it's a quiche.
It's fine.
Oh, it's a pie.
It kind of works, but it's the pickles.
Yes.
It's the pickles that Danny John Jules pulls out of his tongue that make me laugh so much. Because they're whole. I don't know. That makes me laugh.
There's a weird bit later on when Cat comes back, when he realises that he can take the money out of the little charity tub.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy at the bar, and I noticed that because, again, I want it all to work as it should. So there's a guy at the bar drinking a pint, but just drinking it like normally.
Yeah,
so like this,
just drinking it normally.
And you're like, oh, you've completely taken me out of it.
You've ruined it. You've ruined this intense science fiction story for me.
It's just that perfectionist in me that, like I say, this. I think if they'd have planned it out, and I don't want to say they didn't plan it out, but if they'd have come at it with a little bit more attention to detail from everyone. And I know it's only a daft little, 30-minute sci-fi thing in the late 80s, but if they just put that little bit extra attention into it, it would have been a near perfect episode.
I'm gonna guess, with as tight as the parts they do are, and then where it falls off, I'm going to guess it's all time constraint, right?
Probably.
Because it feels like people were working on it that wanted to do exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Like that's what they wanted to do. But they barely made it happen. Did you read the thing about the original opening scene? They're all like, or is that the next episode? I can't remember which. They're playing strip poker.
Oh no, I don't.
Yeah, and it didn't work because Cat looks like he's winning because he's got so many pieces of clothes, and the other guys are in their underwear, but Crichton has got his black armor off, and it's just the fleshy bits underneath. It's only written in a description, but I was like, that's horrific sounding, and I'm kind of glad. I actually think it's the next episode.
Another piece of trivia I got for this, on the 2-disc Series 3 DVD, apparently it's got I need to find this, a bonus feature that shows the whole episode backwards, so that all the backwards sequences are forwards, and the backwards dialogue can be heard properly. I need to find that, because that sounds like it could be hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
That's like, have you ever seen the film Memento?
Yes.
So there's an Easter egg on the DVD that if you find the Easter egg, it actually plays it in the right order.
I would totally. I want to watch that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that for a long time.
I would totally watch backwards forwards.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
The whole episode backwards could be very funny. It'd be interesting to hear the fake backwards talking, how close it actually is.
Right. Oh, yeah, the fake one. Erskine?
Yeah, that could be it'd be interesting to see how close it actually is. There's a guy I follow on TikTok and Instagram who plays songs backwards and then reverses the footage to see how close he is. And they're really good. I don't know how the hell he does it. But
that's wild.
I'll have to send you some stuff. It's really good. It's crazy.
I love the... Another Rimmerism I truly enjoy in this is a barroom brawl happens, and even though he's a hologram that cannot get hurt, he absolutely hides.
See, there's a section in the next episode that I wish it linked back to this, and it could so easily, but it doesn't.
I know what you mean. A barroom brawl is brought up.
Yes, and I wanted it so badly to reference this episode, and it doesn't.
But, I think, again, in today's day and age of how you would film and you'd know that people will go back and stream stuff, I think you would, And again, this is still an age. I love, and I apologize if you end up wanting to talk about it elsewhere, but you showed me a letter that someone had written into us talking about how he was an American as well, who would watch us on PBS and always freaking out not knowing if it'd come on again. If that was the last time ever. And I think because that nature of TV has been lost, each episode really is its own thing and doesn't connect back, except for the couple of little lore pieces that stick through. But I think nowadays you would reference the fight in this one if you were going to talk about a barroom brawl.
Yeah, I think so. But like you said, I don't think they knew necessarily. Well, I think we've also talked about it as well, that I think a lot of them, I didn't necessarily think when they wrote them, they knew the order they were actually going to air in as well. I think that plays into it a lot. We talked a lot, didn't we, about the first season, how certain episodes got switched up. But also, again, going back into stuff we talked about previously, it'd be interesting to see whether this works out going forward, but I think it has up to this point where the episodes seem to come in pairs. So looking at this one and the next one, this one, big sci-fi concept, time hole, going to an alternative planet that's backwards, and then a really sort of, through a microscope, small sort of character study episode, and they've done it a lot already. Like you've got Future Echoes, big sci-fi concept, thanks for the memory, kind of small character-driven episode. Then Queeg is kind of like a character-driven episode, then into parallel universe of this big sci-fi concept. They do seem to come in pairs like that, and it would be interesting to see moving forward whether that's something they keep up with. And I like it, and actually.
They reversed the order this time. Big sci-fi concept right out the gate.
Yeah.
And then sort of drop, because I think for the opening series it was obviously a sci-fi concept for the mining ship and getting suspended animation, but the Future Echoes being the second episode, and going so big in sci-fi, and this kind of reverses it. Does this bring to one of my favorite sci-fi jokes? Of a button of a joke ever. Again, they make funny stuff that can be really smart jokes and stuff, or just like clever. And then I love in this episode on Rimmer and Dave sitting on top, getting ready to go into the invisible ship, and Rimmer's like, "Gosh, it could have worked. We were so close," or whatever. "Where's the cat?" "He's in the bushes, And then they really give it a second.
That pause,
for them to sit there and pause before they're like, and realize what that means. And that shot of the cat standing up straight after he's been trying to drop a deuce in the bushes.
Oh, just imagine that though. It's funny, I said to you, so when I watched this last night, my wife Tracy was like, I don't think I've ever seen this episode. And we get halfway through and she's like, just imagine if you were taking a and I was like, well done, go and spoil the entire joke at the end. She's like, really? Is that how it ends? And I'm like, yep.
And his walk back to the ship, don't ask.
Well, I think that pause is as much for the audience to catch up as anything else, because you've probably not considered it, and then we're just going to pause and let you think about it and then go, oh.
It's so good. I mean, it's up there with it's a smecking garbage pot. It's one of the better endings ever. Oh my god, so good. Well, then, what did you rate this?
Honestly, an 8. Like I say, that if they'd have really gone in and honed all that backwards and forwards stuff to be exactly how you would want it to be, this is a 10 out of 10 episode for me. But I think there's just a few wonky little things in it that just... And it's I know it's totally me, just wanting things to be better than they are. Like, as we've talked, it's not 2024. It's 1989 with a very low budget. But I think I'd give it an 8. It was definitely one I enjoyed the more. By the third viewing, it was like, this is so much fun.
I was very similar in my take. I did give it a 7 out of 10 because I said the premise is so good. And the gags are the one-off gags, the Wilma thing, the button at the end of the thing with Kat and the bushes and stuff. There's so many good one-off jokes. The barroom brawl and stuff. I said they've taken a big swing with a new way of doing the dwarf, but they haven't quite found that rhythm that will come, but it will come. and it I got ready to give it an 8, and I went, I gotta give it somewhere to go. So I gave it a 7. But I kind of wanted to give it an 8, so I gave it a 7 because I thought I gotta give the show somewhere to go. That's where I left it.
Fair enough. That was a good episode. Like I said, the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, it was okay. And then the more you kind of watch it and you start to see where it's gonna go, like you say, and that dichotomy of the two separate. You've definitely got that divide now where, like you say, Kat and Lister are buds. They're hanging out all the time, and then Rimmer's finally got his little subordinate that he can boss around and make him feel big about himself. And you can see that we're kind of going backwards but moving forwards, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, go and step back a little bit,
which I like,
but we'll move forward.
Yeah,
and I love the relationship that will happen between Dave and Crichton because of that, what's happening with Rimmer and stuff. It's so good. Like it just, they smartly made just a couple of tweaks that I think kept the show going, it's like Doctor Who, right? Would never be a thing if they hadn't come up with the idea of like, let's recast them and we'll they can regenerate, right? And it allows the show to
go on forever, basically.
Yeah, it's like a reboot every time, right? And I think this was smart. They made just a few changes to re-energize the show and give them some new directions to go in. And man, I love Crichton so much. I'm so happy.
I'm getting there. It feels a little weird. I tell you what, it would have been interesting to see how it would have been if they'd have got the original guy back instead of Robert Llewellyn.
I just can't imagine anyone but Robert Llewellyn because I saw him first and saw the Crichton episode out of order. So he was always my Crichton, and I was like, "What is this dude? What's going on here?" Yeah,
it would have been interesting. I think the original Crichton. I apologize if you listen. I can't remember what your name is. I think he had a little more sass than Robert Llewellyn did. Like at the end when he finally kind of, I think he had that a little better than Robert Llewellyn does. But I think overall he probably fits in better to the overall sort of group dynamic between the four of them.
If I say the episode title Quarantine, does that mean anything to you? Because
not really.
I will argue. It's a monologue I memorized way too young as a kid. Crichton in that now it's a couple of series away, I believe. But so he's been living with the boys for a bit, and I think what you're after is there.
Okay.
The sass and stuff is It's coming. But I think I think part of the idea we're missing too is not seeing that episode they were going to do where he's rebuilding, and like in that thing I found, it talked about the personality had to get scrubbed, you had to reboot and all this stuff. So it's like the idea that it's
not the same Crichton, basically.
Yeah, they're rebuilding this person's or this android's personality. So I think that stuff will come. If I say the phrase does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, I know that.
So I think it comes. I think that will come.
We shall see. I'm looking forward. Like I say, we're starting to get into uncharted territory a little bit. I mean, not that I have seen them, but I'm not anywhere near as familiar as I am with series 1 and 2 with these. So I'm enjoying the foray into the ones that I don't remember a lot of.
Yeah, 3 for me is like a slightly clearer picture. 4, 5, 6, like the back of my hand. I know those.
Very interesting. I mean, the episode after the next one, obviously everybody knows that one.
Yes. You are correct.
Cool. I guess that will wrap up this episode then. I can't believe that's it over. Yeah, we've talked way more about it than I thought we were going to. But yeah, just such a good episode, and again, like you say, a real good jumping off point of being a change, but still not changing too much. It still feels like Red Dwarf, but just changing a little bit, just to freshen it up. Definitely,
it's like it evolves.
Yeah. And it needs things need to, otherwise it becomes stale. So yeah, absolutely. Right. So, if you are wanting to keep up with what we're doing, I have been posting on Instagram a little bit more. So if you want to follow us on the socials, we are on Facebook and Instagram at Dwarf Memory, and on X or Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it, Dwarf_Memory. And I'm trying to post on there a little bit more. And also, I'm going to put a plug out there. Please go on to iTunes or wherever you can leave a review for us, and just leave us a written review on there, because our numbers are steadily increasing. I have noticed that, and that's good. We're starting to drag extra people in, Blake. People are enjoying what we're doing.
We're dragging them into the time hole. I love it. And on that note, if you haven't, while you're there, subscribe. Well, when you go catch us on any of the podcatchers, if you haven't yet, which I say, if you haven't, please do, because I'm notoriously bad for listening to a new podcast for the first time and then forgetting to subscribe. And just kind of checking on it here and there. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss. Email us your comments to dwarfmemory@gmail.com. And on the next episode, we will be discussing Series 3, Episode 2, which is titled Marooned. And I would say a classic as well. So make sure to watch before you join us for the next episode. Yeah. Guaranteed good laughs if you haven't seen it.
Oh, God, it could have worked. It really could. Where's Blake? He won't be long. He's, in the bushes. I've got to stop him.
Don't ask.